And hello, my people, my people. Hey, everybody. Welcome to another Convergence Healing podcast. You guys, I just love doing this. I was sharing with our guests that I'm about having fun now. I just need to have a good time doing what I love. And doing the podcast this way, where it's improvisational and it's just push the record button and go, just is so much more fun than all the stress that I used to put into creating these episodes. And I appreciate the feedback from you guys that actually you're enjoying what we're doing. So thank you so much for that. Remember, this is the Convergence Healing Podcast, and our focus is to meet and share information about healing, about health, about wellness, about living a full life. And our guest today is one of those people. I love to bring guests on who have gone through what I've come to call post-traumatic growth. And I think that's so important to recognize, guys. There's this experience where we have trauma and maybe we go down the rabbit hole, but we come back up even bigger and greater and more powerful. And that's post-traumatic growth. Our guest is an example of that. His name is Chris Salem. Chris, I so appreciate your being here and just gracing us with your presence and all your skill and background. And thank you for that. And just, will you just share with the audience a little bit about maybe who you are and what brought you to this experience of becoming a thought leader?
Absolutely. Well, first of all, Peter, I love being here on your show and everything that you represent. And yes, it's all about having fun and just allowing things just to be. We're just having a conversation, and people that your audience are just hearing what comes from the heart. And that's what I love. So I'm not going to give the typical, what people tell you, I do this, blah, blah, blah. I'm going to say that I always like to lead why I do what I do versus what I do. And the why is that I'm a man that stands very true to my values. And when I talk about values, it's not about religion or politics. It's about the values that define you as a person. And those values for me are the things that I learned along the way through this journey from struggle into more peace and prosperity. And those values are transparency, honesty, and integrity. It was those three values that, if you would have asked me 21 years ago, I would have said, those are not my values. As a matter of fact, I didn't even know what they were, but they would never be transparent, honest, or integrity, because I did everything opposite of that. But nonetheless, it was transparency and vulnerability that really allowed me the first steps to heal and to move forward. And those are the values that drive my life. I'm a happily married man to my wife, Maria. I have a 13-year-old son, CJ, who I'm very active in his life, and I love being part of all the things he does in his sports. And that is the why. But now the what I do is I'm an executive coach, I'm a corporate trainer, and a professional speaker. I've dedicated my life to helping people to overcome limiting beliefs so they can develop a success foundation to become more in their personal lives and businesses, and learning how to elevate their brands and their businesses simultaneously to connect with people based on why they do what they do versus what they do, to attract more business organically and then also through referrals. So that is the why, and then the what. And there you go.
I love that. That's just awesome. And it's very similar to how I operate and where I've learned to come to in my life. That idea of transparency. And you used a word that I get excited about lately. It's been about a year or two that this word just sparks energy in me. And it's that word vulnerability. And I look at vulnerability as that superpower. I really do. So much of our culture is about playing down vulnerability, especially as we go into the older generations. It's interesting to see vulnerability be something as a very different experience in the younger, especially the generation that's coming up now, that's in their 20s, right there.
Yeah.
And vulnerability, I really do think it's a superpower. And the more I think about it, I look at it and I go, well, I fall in love with people when they show me their vulnerability.
Yeah.
Right. I actually will engage with someone who's selling a product when they show me their vulnerability.
Yeah.
Right. When they are open to expressing their truth, to being seen, to not being hot, not hiding, that type of stuff. And so I really look at vulnerability as this thing that I want to nurture. And it's always been, in my growing up and in my story, vulnerability was a dangerous thing. It was a bad thing. If you were vulnerable, you were weak. If you were weak, you were a victim. And I love that you kind of brought that up, but you really triggered that in me.
Yeah.
And then you brought it into a level of business, right?
Yes.
That transparency in business, that authenticity in business, right? And being your true self and coaching
Yes.
people to do that. I absolutely agree with you. When I do my speaking work, I often lead with a story that people can really identify with, or it catches them, right? And that story is I open up about how I was killed, right? How somebody drove me into the back of a semi truck and I died and I had all these health issues. And I'm very vulnerable about what those health issues were, how they were present in my life. And when I do that, people lean forward and I get to feel their heart. And although it's a story that I've said probably thousands of times, every time I say that and I connect with people on that story, I feel like I made a new friend.
Oh,
That
absolutely, you
vulnerability.
do. Because again, not only do they relate to you, but they feel that you relate to them. There's something compelling. It may not be the same situation that you went through, but it was something similar that they can relate to that really resonates with them, and that's what draws them in.
I love the idea about bringing this more into business because we're at a very interesting place where the business paradigm is changing. I
Yes.
have clients that go from the early 20s all the way into the 60s. And it's so interesting to see the generations as they're looking at business. And most of my clients are very powerful women. They're amazing, strong, incredible women. And the women that are in their older group, say 40, 50, 60, the women that are in that group had to give up their femininity in order to be successful in business. They had to sort of cut it off and hide it, right? And the younger group is saying, no, I'm going to be a woman in the workplace. I'm not going to try and be a man. I'm going to still be feminine. I'm still going to be in that energy of that I'm a woman in this experience. And if you can't handle that, that's not my problem.
Yep.
There's a huge shift going on with that, right? I call them my goddesses, right? They're just like, they're stepping out. And I love metaphors. And there's a metaphor in the story of Kali in India. And Kali was a god created by all the other gods. He's more powerful than any god. And Kali, she came into being and ended up killing all the gods. And as Krishna, the only way Krishna knew to tame or to connect with Kali was to lay down at her feet. So he laid down at her feet in love, and she was able to see that love. And then she switched from being violent, right, the god of death, of war, of killing, to the goddess of love, of connection, of mother, of that type of experience, right? But Kali has both those things. And I talk to my female clients about that. I'm like, look, I'm a guy, I don't know, but I love women. And I know that you are this power. And what would it be like to step into that power, to step that power forward, not by cutting off your identity, not by becoming someone else. And I think that's something everybody can relate to, but not by becoming somebody else, but by being the best version of you. And some women are more feminine than others, by being the version of you that walks into that room, whether it's a very feminine female to a power a lesbian, right? Or however it is, right? How can you, and I have to do that too. How do I get to walk into a room in my own authentic self? So I love that you're holding people's hands so
Yeah.
that they can do that, and you're
Yes.
walking them into the world. That line, it's one, I'm mostly in health and wellness, and you're crossing that line with health and wellness in business and
Yes.
money and finances, where there's so much dysfunction in those areas.
No, absolutely. Again, it's through vulnerability that we how we grow. It's okay that we're never going to be great at everything. We're going to have challenges. We're going to have setbacks, and the only way that we're going to be able to grow and move on from that is being vulnerable to say, okay, I surrender. I need help. and needing help means that you're weak. As a matter of fact, it means you're strong. See, I had learned growing up, it was the direct opposites. My father was always, hid everything, and that, you were not supposed to express your feelings. And now, even though I did learn and picked up a lot of things that he did, I did still express my feelings, oftentimes in anger, because I would display that quite frequently. But in a way, I think it was good that I did that, because I didn't bottle it up as much as my dad did. And obviously it ended up taking my father's life, because he died at the age of 56 from lung cancer, which I
Wow.
believe is just a physical manifestation of his emotional demons that he had suppressed for all those years. And it just took his life. And that was the defining moment for me, though. That I could say that I struggled for 12 years of alcohol, drugs, sexual addiction. Sexual addiction was so strong. And that, when my father was dying, that was like the defining moment. I had two near-death experiences that didn't do it. It was in that one moment, my father, a day before he died, that changed to say that if no matter what has happened to me, whatever cards have been dealt to me, it's up to me to do whatever is necessary to get me out of how I'm feeling, how I'm struggling. Didn't know how I was going to do it. I
Right.
just said to myself, this is the day that I'm going to make a commitment to take one step forward. And, the AA says, just make sure that, you look down, you can see where your feet are planted, you take one step forward. And that's what I started doing. And I stumbled across a process that allowed me to get out of the root cause to my limiting beliefs, which I didn't even know what the heck those were at the time. But it
Right.
was that need for validation. And I began to look back in my childhood and began to see the pattern of this need for validation that I didn't get from my father, and how it played out with other people, and how it affected my self-esteem, confidence, my communication with myself, other people, my behavior, my decision making, my ability to take risks that were not like how it is today. And it impacted me such a negative way. And I started going, wow, that's it. I got to get rid of this need for validation. How do I do that? And then eventually I was able to let it go, forgiving my father, more importantly, forgiving myself. But it sounds easy when I say it, but I'll tell you, it wasn't. It took me a little while to really get it out of my system, out of my body, from every cell in my being. And that way, when anything that would trigger anger in me, I would feel it for a couple seconds, and it would bounce right off. It didn't stick to me like it usually did and
Right.
take out my day,
Like
because that's
water
what
off
it
a
did.
duck's back.
Exactly. It was like a basketball hitting, boop, and it bounced off. And I knew that I rid myself of that belief, and I adopted healthier disciplines and beliefs that became a foundation that allowed me to move into a completely different way of living, and a completely different way of thinking, from a fixed to a growth mindset. And again, using those daily routine and those disciplines to have a positive impact in every aspect of my life and my business. That would be my self-esteem, confidence, my communication, behavior, and my ability to be more interdependent versus codependent that I
Yeah,
lived my first 30 years of my life.
absolutely. I understand that codependency is, as I shared, I've been in those programs,
Yes.
Al-Anon, for years, and I just find it so rewarding and so it just like it gives me a space to actually breathe and go, wait a minute, let's step back. And I work a lot in that area. And I'm sorry for for your loss with your
Yeah.
father. I understand that. Um, there's a moment that I'm always really interested. I'm always really curious. And you automatically touched on that moment. That moment when you just decide. That moment where you said, I didn't know what it was going to look like. I think you said something like
Yeah.
that. I didn't know what it was going to look like, but I decided. It wasn't my near death experiences. It was this moment that created that shift. Can you talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I had reached, I had reached, when my dad was dying, I'd almost reached that, I guess that rock bottom, if you want to call it. And I've hit rock bottom before. So I just thought, oh, this is another rock bottom. I know at the time when my dad was dying, I also had just taken on, I was still working for someone at the time. I had taken on a new job to launch a couple trade shows. I'd been hired away from another company. Now, I didn't know this at the time, but they ended up hiring me. This guy who hired me, he did it for a reason to actually use me as a scapegoat to protect his own ass, so that I would take the brunt when things didn't work out, so that I would get fired. It would protect him. I didn't know it at the time, but he was acting really cruel to me, even when my dad was dying. Like, how dare you walk out of my Christmas party? My dad's dying. I think that's more important, but no regard whatsoever at all. But I remember that defining moment where I told you, when I was with my father looked over at me and he couldn't talk. His eyes were open, but he couldn't, it was like he was already gone in a way. He was still alive, but the morphine was slowly slowing his body down. And as a result of it, I felt like he was talking to me, even though he wasn't, verbally talking to me. It was like, but I can understand what he was saying to me. It was weird. It was like the hair on my arms like went up, and like it was very, very, I don't know if you want to call it spiritual. I don't know whatever you call it, but it was like he was telling me that if I could do it all over again, I would have not been the way I was to you and your brother and your mother. He goes, I only did what I thought was best. I didn't know better. I only give what I could give. And then it was 3 months later that I figured it out, after I started this journey, that he was right, because you can only give what you have. My dad grew up being neglected by his own father. He didn't know any better. He didn't know how to be the father we wanted him to be, because he didn't have it himself. How could you give something you don't know? And so, I began to realize that this wasn't intentional, but yet it happened. And there were some cruel things that happened along the way, but nonetheless, that was the defining moment. Like, for me, it was just like it was like a switch went off in my head, that I turned from being the living my life in excuses, pointing the finger at everyone else, complaining, to saying to myself, this is my responsibility. This is my mess. This is my shit, and I got to clean it up.
Yeah.
And I don't know how I'm going to do it, but that was it. And that, I never looked back from that day. My dad passed away the next day, and it was almost like, I was very sad, don't get me wrong, but it was also a relief. It was almost like it was his gift to say that I'm leaving this world, and I'm taking that weight that you've been carrying around, that mask you've been wearing. I'm going to take it away for you, and I'm going to dump it into the water or the ocean wherever I go. And sure enough, that's what happened. And call it crazy, but that was the defining moment. And it was like, for the first time, I actually had a connection with my father that I never had, growing up, or anytime, when he was alive. And to me, it was the greatest gift that he ever gave in that moment of time.
Yeah. You just said the word that kept bouncing around in my head when you were saying he was speaking to you, but his voice wasn't there,
Yeah.
and you had a moment of connection.
Yes.
I think those are spiritual moments. I
Yes.
think those are moments where all of the what is the right word? The matrix that we live in, whatever, just kind of fades away, and we cut through that stuff, right? And those true heart connection experiences happen.
Yes.
And it's so amazing that you were able to have that with your father, even with it's apparently what he did to you and your family. Even with that, you were able to be present and to receive that. That's just that's amazing. And I think that connection is really what it's all about. One of my for some reason, I want to segue into this idea that one of my favorite books that I read at least 10 years ago, probably even longer, was probably more like 15 longer years ago, was, T. Harv Eker, right?
Oh, yeah.
Millionaire Mind, right? When I read that book, I was like, oh my God, this guy stole my work. Because he talks about how the brain gets hijacked. There's a story that he shares where he thought something about someone who's winning the Oscar, and he was like a judgmental type of thing. And he's like, I can't have that. I'm about to go on stage. I can't speak like that. If I'm going to teach people, I have to make sure that I'm, not contradicting my own work. And I love that about, how he was aware of that. But this idea that who we are in our spiritual life, our personal life, is going to show up in our business life. And that there's always been this concept that we have to separate business from personal, right? That that I don't think that's true. And I think that when we carry that connection with people, and we are connected with, who we are and what we believe in, and we're in that vulnerable integrity. We're not selling, a swamp. What's that old saying? Whatever. I got a swamp for you. Whatever. That old way, right? We're not pulling someone over someone or conning someone. And we're in that experience of honest business practices and integrity in business. I think that's where a lot of younger people are going too.
Yeah.
They're bringing in this idea of I don't want to hide my emotions in business anymore. I don't want to act as if everything's okay. I don't want to disconnect and act like the company that I'm working for is this great company when they're raping the Amazon or that type of thing. Like those types of things are no longer acceptable to people.
Yeah.
Especially this younger generation. I think, the millennials kind of challenged it. The hippies did a little bit around it, but they didn't really stick to it. They, that what they had in their younger years. And I think it's been a progress where people are more and more about the connection, about that intimacy in a way, even intimacy in a business professional way. How am I connecting even with you? Like in this open, honest, it's intimate, right? And we're sharing these moments with a broader understanding of people, right? So I think that these moments are super powerful, and these moments of creating this experience. So I want to just say thank you. And I love that you're aware of that moment, because most people I talk to, and I ask that question, what was the turning point for you? Most people, it's like a period. It's a period of time. Well, eventually I was doing this and all of a sudden I just found myself. For you to have that awareness of really saying, hey, I don't know how I'm going to do it, but that change is starting today, and it's starting now, right? And I want to emphasize that, because so many people think they have to know how they're going to do it, right? Whether it's creating their financial well-being or whether it's creating their mental health.
Absolutely.
You don't have to know how to do it. It's not important. You just have to put your feet on the ground, like you said, see where you're standing, right? And make the decision.
Exactly.
Yeah. That's something that I sense is important when you're working with people.
Yes, absolutely. It's you were so right about business in life, because it does, whatever's happening in your life affects your business. Whatever happens to your business, so no matter how hard you try to separate it, it's going to creep in either way.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm starting to see signs, Peter. I do a lot of work with EAP providers and companies direct, and I'm beginning to see these companies looking for content around work-life harmony, stress reduction, emotional well-being, mental toughness, job fatigue, job burnout, all these things that we're talking about, because they recognize that no matter what they do to try to avoid it, it's a problem, it's inevitable, and we have to at least now not only create awareness, which they're doing because maybe they're checking a box off, but now let's start doing something about it, that we can actually help our people do these things for themselves so they can be more efficient, more productive. They want to work here. That raises retention, and it brings people together to engage in a more interdependent versus codependent way. Absolutely. So there's so many great things, but they have to see the bigger picture of how this all could evolve and really impact their bottom line long term.
Yeah, and for the employee, I think it's interesting because the employee isn't willing just to work for a paycheck anymore. They want their business life, their employment life to be rewarding, They
Yes.
want to connect with people. They want to have those types of things. And that makes so much sense to me. I mean, I look at my dad's generation and we got these people, they worked, my dad's generation, they worked at a company for decades. They didn't leave, right?
Oh yeah.
Once they were in, right? And that was it. And all of their relationships were around these people, and yet they didn't know really them. They had no idea who these people really were. They worked with them every day for 35 years, and they really don't know who these people are, right? And I'm seeing that's just not acceptable for people now. They
No.
want relationship. They want what you're talking about. They want authenticity and transparency. And I love that word, vulnerability. They want that present in their
Yes.
bosses and in the company, right? In the company mandate, they want transparency. And that's hard for a lot of people who are at the top right now, who are older, who are maybe afraid of their vulnerability.
Well, they absolutely are. They don't want to be. That's why companies, play it safe. They're conservative. They don't want to. They may not hire people that are smarter than they are. But then again, the companies that get ahead, that's what they do. They do the direct opposite.
Right,
So, it was like Zappos. When Tony Hsieh was alive,
right.
he did the same thing. They built this culture from the ground up that was about everything we're talking about: transparency, vulnerability, learning from one another, interdependency, values. And they built that from the day Zappos started. And even though they're a part of Amazon now, they still operate at a high level. Because the output is just a direct reflection to their customers of what goes on the inside. But yet every year they're ranked in the top 5 for customer service. In this case, they're an online retailer for women's shoes and other things. But there are other companies out there like that, but there's a lot more, far, far more, that are not operating that way. And
They need you, Chris.
Yeah.
They need you.
And that's what I'm slowly doing. I'm out there doing presentations and trainings, but my goal is to now start moving more and more from the check mark to let's start making this happen over time and start seeing the results long term. I create results. I can create it in small pockets where they see the evidence. Now we gotta finish what we started.
Right. And it sounds like your experience in gaining sobriety and those years of that have really influenced your life,
Big time.
right?
Matter of fact, a lot of these things, Peter, I'm a firm believer, start in your own home, because this is a 24/7 thing. This isn't something like you turn on when you go to work and then you come home and you can just, go back to default what you are. These are the things. This is how you show up as a role in your duty as a spouse, a partner, a parent, a member in your community, a member in your church. If you're the owner of your business, to your people, if you work with somebody, this is something you do 24/7. It's not once in a while. And obviously we spend most of our times in our home. So it starts in the home, comes out into the community, then into our businesses. This is where interdependency can really thrive based upon consistency. It's got to be consistent, and discipline helps us to be with consistency to make these changes over time. So
Well,
it's not, yeah.
and you're talking about walking your talk.
Yes.
I love that old saying. There's all these sayings that I like about things like that. But walking your talk is so important, because I see so many people who are leaders in the industry, and I think they're going to hurt in a few years because they aren't walking their talk. And they are being exposed, with the Me Too movement and with all this type of stuff. If you aren't walking your talk and you aren't doing what you teach, I don't know how long you're going to have much of a life,
Yeah.
doing your business. One of the things I talk about in my book is that we have to start loving our pain, embracing our pain. I call it befriending the dis-ease, right? And my cancer clients taught me that, where they taught me to actually love the tumor, and that they need to love that tumor, and which is kind of an odd concept. How do you love the thing that is potentially going to kill you, right?
Yeah.
How do you love that? And when they do that and they bring love to the pain, which is what the tumor is. So you talked about how you thought your dad, a lot of his issues in his life created what he ended up experiencing medically, right? So this idea of walking your talk, man, I've had to be like, okay, all right, all right, I'm experiencing this. I have to break out my own book, right? I gotta, okay, what do I need to do? What do I tell people to do? What do I guide them to do? And I need to now practice that in my life. And it's fun to see somebody who's willing to do that still, right?
Yeah.
And I just want to say thank you for being that man. Thank you for being that person that does walk his talk and says, it starts at home. I really truly believe that it starts in our relationships, our
Yes.
interpersonal, and those connected relationships is where the healing really starts and the change really
Yes.
starts. For
Yes.
someone that might be afraid to take that step, right? What would they're gosh, maybe they're afraid of being vulnerable. They're afraid of speaking their truth. They're worried that it'll be interpreted as a weakness. What would you say to them if you were coaching them right now? We'll put you on the spot.
Yeah. So what I would say to them is, how comfortable are you being uncomfortable right now? What would you rather have right now? Being uncomfortable, be more comfortable, or being comfortable being uncomfortable? Now,
Mm,
some people would say, guess I can live with this because I would never want to be vulnerable to this because I think it'll be just too painful. I said, would, a small period of time of being uncomfortable be worth the rest of your life?
mm,
And I can relate to you because I grew up where you could never be vulnerable, not around my father, not around anything. I grew up in an environment where vulnerability was, it was a sign of weakness. But yet I got sick and tired of being sick and tired. So I would say, are you sick and tired of being sick and tired? Are you sick and tired of being frustrated, angry, overwhelmed, and feeling like you're in your own internal prison? If you're ready, again, it's learning. What I would say to them, it's learning to trust the process. Just be learning to, say, if you could take a deep breath right now, just be present right now. Take a deep breath. Do you have any fear right now? Not right now. What if that could be for most of the time when you're awake and you're working and you're with people and you're creating new experiences, learning to be present? Would that be more beneficial to you than the other way around? Yeah. Well, would you be willing to trust the process of controlling what you can and letting go of what you can't, to at least try it and just knowing that if you make a mistake, you just start over and do it again.
right.
And by doing that, in time, it'll get better and better and better. So oftentimes some people get that and they start to make those changes. Sometimes it takes a little while, but it gets them to that point where they begin to accept vulnerability and transparency as they can see the light where it can take them. I know it did for me and for other people I've worked with. So it's just, again, it doesn't have to be perfect. It's just about progress, and perfectionism is a codependent behavior. Progress is interdependent. It's harmony. There's no balance. It's give or take. So, again, the only one who's going to be judging you is you. And if other people judge you, so what? I used to always care about what other people thought of me. I don't care anymore.
Oh, yeah. I love that. Say that phrase again. Perfection is a codependent behavior. Is that what you said?
Perfectionism is a codependent behavior, and progress is a interdependent behavior. Knowing that when we show up to be your best, not to be the best, to be the best means you're going to be perfect, but to be your best means that I'm coming in with all my strengths, all my skills, and I'm going to give it my all. But I'm not going to be perfect. I'm going to maybe some of my flaws and my weaknesses will come out. It doesn't matter. I'm just trusting the process of controlling what I can and letting go of the rest. Wherever the chips may fall from that process, then that's what the results will be. But I always find that your results end up being more of what you inspired to go after when you follow that process, rather than tying yourself to expectations, to outcomes, getting caught up in the past and the future with your fixed mindset, fear-based thinking, and now riding the roller coaster of life and business with the ups and downs. I don't want to ride the roller coaster anymore. I'm done. I jumped off that roller coaster ride 21 years ago. I swim in the middle. So when things are going good, I'm still in the middle. When things are going bad, I'm still in the middle. I look at every experience as a learning opportunity, not something happening to me, but for me. And when it happens for you, I can now be the better example through my behavior and communication for others to do for themselves.
Love the line, baby. That's awesome. On that note, I am going to remind everybody that they can have some of my healing teas, and you can go to convergencehealingteas.com to find those. Today, I'm sharing my happy tummy tea. It's one of my favorites, super good for the gut.
Well, I love that you got your tea. I got my green tea right here.
Fine, fantastic. Teas, it's a trend. It's finally taking over the
Oh
United States.
yeah, I drink tea every day.
It's so much better for you.
Next to me every day. As long as I'm in my office, of course.
Well, that's great. Well, I could always send you some if you would like. So just let me know. Go to convergencehealingteas.com. But Chris, I'm serious. If you would like some tea, just let me know.
I absolutely will.
And on that note, we need to wrap up. Chris, you're awesome. When we first met, I was like, there was this like, who's this guy? I'm on Facebook messaging you. I so appreciate you're just being open and allowing my connecting with you. So from my heart to yours, thank you so much. And will you share how people can connect with you? I love your Facebook page and how you share all that inspiration every day. So if you don't mind sharing that as well,
sure.
But let us know where we can find you.
Well, the best place, Peter, would be just, you can check out my website at ChristopherSalem.com. It's one word. Feel free to reach out to me on email, Chris@ChristopherSalem.com. I'm just all about meeting people. It's about getting to know you and, human to human. That's what it's about. It's about connection. And if you want to hook up on social media, it's better off on probably LinkedIn a little bit more. I check LinkedIn more. So Christopher Salem is a great place to connect with me there.
Great. Chris, thank you again. I really appreciate it. And to all of our listeners, the Convergence Healing Podcast is actually here for you. It's something that I do because I do it for myself because I love these amazing, inspiring people because they lift me up. But it's part of my purpose to share information like this in the world to lift you up. So if you got somebody you want to meet or an issue you want to talk about, just leave it down below in the comments. Message me through all the social media platforms. You know how to find me: YouTube Convergence Healing, Facebook Convergence Healing, Instagram Convergence Healing, LinkedIn will be my name, Peter Bedard. And we'll see you guys a little bit later. Thanks so much for tuning in. You're all awesome. Namaste. Love you guys. Bye. And we're out.
Nice. All right. Okay. Went over well. So yeah, let me know when you get it to put it out there, Peter, and I'll make sure that I get it out to my Facebook audience, to some of the groups I'm in, Instagram, and of course LinkedIn as well. And what else do I have? I think those are the major ones. Twitter.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm on Clubhouse. I'm on Clubhouse too, but you can't post anything to Clubhouse.
Yeah, you can't. And I don't have Apple products, so I'm like, I've gotten like 6 invitations to join Clubhouse, and I'm like,
yeah,
I just don't understand. For me, I don't understand buying a $1,200 phone. I just don't.
No, well, put it this way, it's not worth. I wouldn't buy a $1,200 phone just to be on Clubhouse. Don't worry, you're not. No big deal.
Okay. But I appreciate it. Chris, you're one of my inspirations. I love seeing you every day. And when I
thank you so much for having me here. It's been a pleasure. I always love sharing this story to inspire people, wherever they are, that, that, hey, if I can do it, anybody can do it. You've done it. Other people have done it. It's just, it doesn't matter if you're 20, if you're 70, it doesn't matter.
Yep. I'm not
your whole life ahead of you.
All right, man. Take care of
yourself.
All
right, man. Have a great rest of your day.
You too.
Bye.
Bye.